Theodore Vance was 40 years old when he sat in a Memphis attorney's conference room and watched his wife laugh at his inheritance. The primary will of Walter Aaron Vance Sr. had been read in full in 42 minutes. The house on Peach Street that Walter had owned and maintained for 51 years. The 2 vehicles, the personal effects, and a bequest of $1 each to the 18 individuals named in the document. When Henry Carver read Theo's name and the figure beside it, Tamara turned to her sister in the chair to her right, showed her the phone screen where she had typed the number, and laughed. Not the polite, compressed laugh of someone managing themselves in a formal setting, but a genuine one, undisguised and carrying. She said, to the air around her more than to any one person, "Well, I suppose that clarifies some things." She smoothed her jacket. She crossed her legs. She settled into the satisfied composure of a woman who believed the situation had just confirmed a decision she had already made. Henry Carver waited for the room to go quiet. Then he looked across the table with the unhurried attention of a man who had been doing this work for 40 years and had long since stopped being surprised by any expression that appeared in these rooms. He said, "There is a secondary instrument." He set a second envelope on the table. He opened it. He began to read. The Walter Aaron Vance Sr. Living Trust, established 1994, amended 12 times over 30 years. Total assets across real estate, business interests, and investment accounts in 7 states. $800 million. Sole designated beneficiary, Theodore Walter Vance. Tamara's laugh had died the moment Henry Carver said the word secondary. What replaced it lived on her face for the rest of the reading, and was nothing she had planned to put there. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. 6 weeks before Walter Vance died, Theo arrived at the Vance Logistics Dispatch Center on President's Island at 5:40 in the morning, the same hour he had arrived every working day for 11 years, and poured his coffee from the pot his fleet manager always left running, and sat in the office with the day's first manifest in front of him, and the particular quiet of a building that has not yet been asked to do anything. He ran the company his grandfather had handed him when he turned 30. Not handed. Exactly, since nothing Walter did was purely a gift. Walter had said. In the way he said all things that carried weight, the company needs a man who thinks about the work before he thinks about the return. I believe you are that man. You have until the end of the year to show me I'm right. Theo had shown him in 8 months. Vance Logistics operated 19 routes across the Mid-South, a regional distribution network that Walter had built from a single used truck purchased in 1962, and that Theo had, in 11 years of careful management, expanded from 7 routes to 19 without acquiring $1 of outside debt. The trucks were maintained. The drivers were paid well and kept. The margins were honest. It was not a glamorous company, and it did not attract attention, which was exactly the quality both men had always preferred in the things they built. On Theo's desk, in the corner nearest the window, sat a 1954 Morgan silver dollar in a small, clear case. Walter had carried that coin in his front pocket for 60 years, had taken it out and held it in his palm when he was thinking through a problem, had shown it to Theo 100 times when Theo was a boy, and had asked, "You know what this is worth?" Theo would guess. Walter would say, "Whatever the man holding it decides it is." 2 weeks before he died, Walter had given it to Theo without explanation. Theo had kept it on the desk without needing one. His grandfather had a quality that Theo had spent his life studying and only partially succeeded in inheriting: the ability to hold the full measure of a thing without ever displaying it. Walter Vance had built an $800 estate in 60 years and had lived in the same house the entire time, driven used vehicles, until they stopped running, and attended his grandchildren's school events in the same blue jacket he had owned since 1988. His friends at the barber shop called him modest. His attorney called him deliberate. He used to say, in the patient voice of a man who understood that patience was itself a strategy, the value of a thing is never written on its face. The man who reads the face and stops there has already lost. Theo and Tamara had been married 7 years. They had met at a professional development conference in Nashville. She was a corporate attorney, precise and self-possessed, with the quality of attention that serious legal practitioners carry everywhere because they have trained themselves out of the luxury of not paying attention. He had been drawn to her rigor. She had been drawn to something in him she had described once, in the first year, as a quality of deliberateness that she could not replicate in herself. He had taken that as a compliment then. He understood it differently now. What she had admired was the quality, but she had believed it came from a simpler man than it did. She had not asked enough questions to discover the distance between who he appeared to be and who he was. The first 3 years had been good, built on mutual respect and a shared willingness to work. In the 4th year, she had started to measure what they had against what she believed they should visibly have, and the measuring had become, in its quiet way, its own kind of distance. She stopped asking about the company. She stopped asking about his grandfather. She started spending more evenings at firm events he was not invited to. He had noted the pattern without drawing a conclusion, which was how his grandfather had always said you were supposed to approach uncertain terrain, cataloging without committing, until the picture was complete. He had cataloged for 2 years. The picture was nearly complete. The afternoon they drove to Memphis for the will reading. Tamara was quiet in a way that was different from her usual quiet, more still, more conserved, as though she were holding something steady inside a container she was not certain would hold. They had been on the highway outside Jackson for 40 minutes when her phone lit up on the console between them. He saw, for the duration of a single glance, the first name in the notification before the screen went dark. Preston. She silenced it, without looking at him. He kept his eyes on the road. He said nothing at all. The night before the will reading, in the hotel room on Union Avenue, Tamara took her phone to the bathroom, and Theo lay in the dark with the specific alertness of a man who has been adding things up for longer than he acknowledged and has just reached the sum. He could hear enough through the door. Not words, the rhythm. The cadence of practiced familiarity. He waited until she came back and settled, and her breathing changed to the even rhythm of sleep. Then he took his phone from the nightstand and opened the airline app they shared, the one where they managed their travel jointly. He went to her bookings, Memphis to Paris, Tamara Vance. P. Aldridge, 2 weeks from Tuesday. First class. Both seats. He set the phone face down on his chest. He looked at the ceiling. He did not make a sound. His hands did not shake. His face remained perfectly calm. He moved with the same deliberate calm that had always defined the work. He sat up carefully and took the composition notebook from his bag, the same style notebook he used for Fleet Manifest's Advanced Logistics, and he began to build the picture from his phone the way he built any route plan, starting with what was confirmed and moving methodically toward what was implied. He opened the joint bank account and went back 9 months. The pattern was clean and consistent once he knew to look for it. Amounts varied between $600 and $2,200, moved from joint savings to an account number he did not recognize in increments spread far enough apart to look like ordinary spending. Not random. Deliberate. $29,400 in 9 months, organized with the specific care of someone who understood the monitoring thresholds. He photographed the screen at each relevant entry and forwarded 3 statement pages to his personal email address. He opened the credit card transaction record for her personal card, visible because she had set him as an authorized user years before and never removed his access. An oversight that now read as the kind of mistake a careful person makes when their confidence has exceeded their caution. He went back 8 months. Restaurant charges in Charlotte on evenings she had cited late client meetings. A hotel charge in Raleigh on a weekend she had said was a firm retreat. A boutique purchase on a Tuesday she had not mentioned. And dated 6 weeks prior to tonight, a charge to a family law firm in Charlotte. The consultation that produced that charge had taken place 3 weeks before Walter Vance's first hospitalization. She had not told Theo about it. She had begun the exit before the inheritance was ever a consideration. He wrote this down in 2 columns, stated versus documented, the way his grandfather would have written it, plainly and without elaboration. Because the plainness was the point. He also ran a brief search on Preston Aldridge through the bar directory on his phone. A corporate attorney at Tamra's firm. 7 years in practice. No disciplinary record. A professional profile photograph in which he looked exactly the way Theo had imagined someone named Preston would look. He put the phone and the notebook away. He lay back down in the dark and let the complete accounting of the situation settle into place. He already knew what he was going to do. He had known, in some form, since the moment on the highway when the screen lit up and she silenced it without looking at him. Some things you know before you have the documentation. The documentation was simply for everyone else. She had been planning her exit before Walter died. She had expected the will to confirm that there was nothing to stay for. He put the phone away. He sat in the dark for a long time and let the full accounting of the situation become a settled thing. Not because the settling made it easier, but because an unsettled thing had no practical use. In the morning he put on his suit and drove with her to Henry Carver's office and sat at the table and listened to a room's worth of people here, their names read beside the number 1, and he watched Tamra laugh, and he did not make a sound or move a muscle, and he waited until Henry Carver said the word secondary and put the second envelope on the table. He already knew what the value of a thing was. The reading ended at noon. By 2 o'clock, Theo was in Henry Carver's private office on the 4th floor of the Madison Avenue building, the same office where Henry had met with Walter for 30 years, a room that held the particular density of a space in which important things had been decided for a long time. Henry had already set the trust document on the desk before Theo arrived. He sat across from Theo and folded his hands and reviewed the key provisions without rushing. Because he had been Walter Vance's attorney for 4 decades and had learned long ago that the people Walter Vance trusted deserved to have things explained fully and without abbreviated respect. "Your grandfather amended the trust 6 times in the last 4 years," Henry said. "The most recent amendment was executed 8 months ago. He made one specific change." He turned a page. He added a provision specifying that no portion of the trust assets may be transferred, assigned, or made subject to any claim arising from the dissolution of Theodore Vance's marriage, regardless of the timing of dissolution relative to the date of the bequest. He looked at Theo over his reading glasses. He knew. He knew, Theo said. The provision compounds what the law already provides. Under Tennessee inheritance law, assets received as a bequest are fully separate property. The trust amendment makes explicit what needed no explanation. Henry set the pad down. There is nothing she can claim. Not $1 of $800 million. He looked at Theo steadily. He also left a letter. "For you. To be given at this meeting." He produced a sealed envelope from the folder. It was Walter's handwriting on the front. One line, "For Theodore, at the right time." Theo held it without opening it. He set the clear case with the Morgan silver dollar on Henry's desk. He said, He gave me this 2 weeks before he died." Henry looked at it. He said, "He showed me that coin every time I came to the house. 40 years. He paused. He said it was worth whatever the man holding it decided. "Yes," Theo said. "Some rooms had been prepared a long time before you walked into them." He opened the letter that evening in his hotel room. Alone, it was 1 page, in Walter's deliberate hand, and it said what Theo had always known his grandfather believed, without ever having heard him say it directly. It ended with, "You always knew what the coin was worth. That is why it belongs to you." He folded the letter and put it with the composition notebook. 2 days later, Theo drove to Aunt Celestine's house on Harbord Avenue. Walter's eldest daughter, 68 years old, who had been present at the reading and had watched Tamara's performance from the far end of the table without altering her expression by a single degree. She opened the door before he knocked. She had been expecting him. She made coffee, and they sat at her kitchen table, and she said, "Before he could begin, your grandfather told me about the trust 3 years ago. He told me he was going to make sure you were protected. He also told me he was going to make sure the people who needed to be seen would be seen." She looked at her coffee cup. He said the dollar was the oldest test he knew. Anybody who laughed at a dollar told you exactly who they were. She looked at Theo. "He was right," she said. He drove back to the hotel and spent the afternoon with Beatrice Hollis, a Charlotte attorney Henry had recommended. A woman who handled high-net-worth divorce proceedings with the focused brevity of someone confirming what she had already expected to find. She reviewed Theo's documentation over a video call and spoke for 11 minutes. She said, "The trust is protected. The unauthorized transfers from the joint accounts are recoverable. The Paris booking is corroborating evidence of the relationship's duration." She paused. "I'll have a filing prepared within a week. She is entitled to half the marital savings, half the equity in the Charlotte house, and nothing else of any significance." She was quiet for a moment. "Mr. Vance, she consulted a divorce attorney before your grandfather passed. She had decided to leave before she knew about the trust." "I know," Theo said. "That means she did not make this decision because of the money." "I know," he said again. That was, in its way, the most clarifying fact of all. He drove back to Charlotte with Tamara the following morning, the Morgan silver dollar in his jacket pocket, the composition notebook in his bag. The drive took 4 hours. They spoke about practical things, the drive, the weather, the week ahead. He answered her questions about the estate with the calm that comes from a man who has already processed the essential thing and is now simply observing the sequence of events that follows. She mentioned the trust once, with the compressed attention of someone who has been told something is real but has not yet found the full shape of it. He answered her question honestly. He did not elaborate. He thanked her for the drive. He went to his study and closed the door. The calendar would do the rest. The formal settlement conference was held 4 weeks later at Beatrice Hollis's office in Charlotte. A conference room on the 7th floor with a long table, good light, and the particular quality of stillness that rooms reserved for legal proceedings tend to accumulate over years of use. Tamara arrived with her attorney, a capable woman named Sandra Griggs, who practiced family law in Charlotte, and who Beatrice had told Theo beforehand, almost certainly reviewed the trust documentation the previous week and understood what the morning was going to require of her. Griggs was precise, unhurried, and prepared. She would do her job. The issue was not her preparation. The issue was the law. Beatrice placed the documents in the center of the table in sequence. The trust instrument, with the most recent amendment dated 8 months prior, highlighted in 3 places. The Tennessee inheritance law citations, annotated and tabbed. The separate property documentation showing the trust had been received in Theo's name alone, held in an account opened in Memphis on the day of the will reading, never commingled with any marital account, not by a single transaction. The bank transfer records. $29,400 moved from joint savings over 9 months in deliberately varied amounts. The airline booking, printed with both names on the itinerary. The family law consultation charge, dated and attributed, placed last. Sandra Griggs reviewed the trust amendment. She reviewed the inheritance law citations with the careful pace of a professional who reads documents she cannot dismiss. She looked at her client once, briefly, with the specific expression of an attorney communicating something she had been hoping not to have to communicate. She said to Beatrice, "We accept the position on the trust." The room was quiet. Tamara looked at the table. She was still in a way she had not been still at the will reading. Not the stillness of composure, but the stillness of having arrived at the end of a calculation. She said, "I didn't know what was in the second envelope." Theo said, "I know." He said it without heat and without comfort. As a plain, accurate statement about what she had and had not known when she made her decisions. The decisions had been made without the information. That did not change what the decisions revealed about the person making them. Sandra Griggs said, in the professional way that represented her best service to her client at that moment, "We'll proceed to the equitable distribution of marital assets." Beatrice walked them through it. The Charlotte house, divided at the appraised equity. The joint savings, less the recoverable transfers, divided equally. The personal accounts, each retained separately. No alimony, no further claims. Tamara signed. Theo gathered his folder. He stood and buttoned his jacket. He said, "My grandfather used to ask me what a coin was worth. He said the answer was whatever the man holding it decided." He looked at Tamara with the complete steady attention of a man who has finished accounting for something and is setting the ledger down. "He left me $1 because he knew I would understand what it meant." I did. He picked up the clear case with the Morgan silver dollar from the table where he had placed it when he arrived. He said, "I hope you find what you are looking for." He walked out of the conference room without looking back, and the door closed behind him in the particular quiet of a thing that has been fully resolved. 10 months later, Theodore Vance moved back to Memphis. He bought a house 4 blocks from the house on Peach Street, where Walter had lived for 51 years, a house with a deep yard and a covered porch facing east, where the morning light arrived at the same angle his grandfather had always described as the best hour of the day. He sat on that porch most mornings before the city came fully awake, with his coffee and the clear case with the Morgan silver dollar on the table beside him, and he thought about the 60 years of deliberate, patient work that had produced the thing the coin now represented. The Trust's first major deployment was a community development initiative in South Memphis, transitional housing, small business infrastructure, workforce training, built on 3 parcels of land Walter had owned since 1974 and never developed, which Theo had understood, on review, to have been held specifically for this purpose. The first groundbreaking was attended by the mayor's office, 2 city council members, and Aunt Celestine, who wore the same dress she had worn to Walter's will reading, and who stood at the edge of the cleared earth and looked at it with the expression of someone who had been waiting a long time for exactly this. Tamara had settled in Charlotte. She left her firm within 3 months of the divorce finalization and took a position at a smaller practice in the South End. Preston Aldridge's name had not appeared in any context Theo was aware of since the summer. The Paris trip had been taken. Theo knew this through a mutual contact who mentioned it once and never mentioned it again. He did not pursue the detail further. He had work to do, and the work was interesting. He had met Avery through the South Memphis Development Project, a Memphis architect whose firm was handling the community center design, who asked better questions in their first meeting than most people asked in a year, and who listened to the answers with the quality of attention that serious practitioners carry everywhere. She had visited the Peach Street house once and walked through every room without commentary, and then stood in the backyard looking at the oak tree in the far corner and said it was the oldest living thing on the block and deserved to stay exactly where it was. He had agreed with her on the spot. They had been building something carefully for 5 months, at the only pace that careful things should be built. One morning in November, Theo sat on the east porch of the house on Harbord Avenue. He had bought it from Celestine's estate when she passed in the fall, because some addresses are worth keeping in the family, and held the Morgan silver dollar in his palm in the early light. The gold white of the sun across the coin, the particular weight of it. He thought about a boy in a barber shop, his grandfather turning that coin over in one hand. You know what this is worth? Whatever the man holding it decides. He closed his hand around it. He was free. He was the heir. He was decided. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.